Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Maryland Apex Accelerator webinar. Glad you could join us today. I'm your host, Yasmin Razak, and I'm the Marketing and Training Coordinator here. Today, the topic is developing a winning cost proposal, and it is led by Keisha Foster, who is the founder of Key to Life Professional Services, LLC. We will get started very shortly, and there will be opportunities for you to ask Keisha your questions by typing them in the chat box on your screen, and we will pause for Q&A throughout the next 2 hours. We will take a 5-minute break at the hour mark. As always, this presentation is being recorded, and a copy of the recording and the slides will be sent to you after the webinar. For those of you who are not familiar with Maryland Apex Accelerator, it's our mission to help Maryland businesses to compete in federal, state, and local government procurement processes. Our services are no cost to you. You just have to have a business that is established and in good standing in the state of Maryland. So if you think you need some assistance, please do register on our website, marylandapex.org, so we can help you. Okay, over to you, Akeisha. The floor is yours.
Hey, hello everyone. Yes, it's Akeisha again. I'm coming back with another training on, the winning proposal. Now, this is a part of the series that we have been going over, talking about how to read a solicitation. Then we went into how to find bids at 25K and less. Then we went to introduction to proposal writing, and that was on the janitorial services. So this is a continuation of the trainings that we've been giving. Then we did proposal writing too. And that was when we were diving deeper into the proposal, creating a proposal response. And today we're going to be going over the cost proposal development to ensure that you are ready to win that contract. You have to know how to write your proposal. So that's what we're here to talk about. I'm your instructor. I've been doing this for over 22 years, I'm a coach. I do proposal writing. So I'm telling you something that I already know. I'm a former contracting officer and a former Apex Accelerator counselor. I've helped my clients win. So I'm telling you what works and what we need to do to win these opportunities. Then also, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about and then yes, I have retired. So it's feeling good to be retired from the military now. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so our agenda. I'm going to give you the first part of instructions. Then we're going to talk about just introducing you to the cost proposal, then the key components of a cost proposal, the types of contracts and their impact on your pricing. All right, tips for developing a competitive and compliant cost proposal. And then part 2 is where we're going to do the practical exercise after we take our 5-minute break, and then we'll leave you time for question and answers. And so as always, I have notes when you get your slides at the end of the session. So if you missed anything, and just be, aware that it's going to move a little fast, but just know you can always go back and rewatch the recording. And if we don't answer your question, be sure that we'll implement that in the next training session, because we have a lot to cover and with just a little time to go over everything. All right, so let's do our quick poll. All right, what do you find to be the most challenging aspect of developing a cost proposal? All right, is it estimating the cost, the direct cost? Is it accounting for the indirect costs? Setting up a competitive yet profitable price, or understanding the difference between contract types? I'll give you a few minutes for that. I think we about have everybody almost. So it's looking like so far, it's looking like just setting up a competitive yet profitable price, for the proposal. And that's what we're going to be diving deep in. We got, I think that's everybody. Let me see. Let me check one more time. Okay, so yes, most of you are struggling with setting up a competitive yet profitable proposal. So in this training, you're going to learn how to set that up. So let me get to them. Okay, so what is a cost proposal? All right, the financial component of a bid in response to an RFP, right? So this is us telling, just like we have to do the technical portion of the proposal, this is how we're going to price the proposal. This directly affects, are you going to win this contract or not? Because if the contract is for the lowest price technically acceptable, they're looking for the lowest price, then it's going to be very paramount to you to know exactly how to price your solicitation. Then the technical proposal has to be accurate, especially if it's a firm fixed price contract. So, in the context of government contracting, a cost proposal is a detailed financial plan that outlines all the expenses associated with completing a project as requested in the RFP, or if it's an RFQ, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, time and materials, cost reimbursable, it doesn't matter. It provides the government agency with a breakdown of how much you, as the prime contractor or the subcontractor, uh, estimate it will cost to deliver the cost of goods. Now, or services described in the technical proposal. So basically, you're telling them how you're going to do this with the technical proposal. Now, why is it important? The cost proposal is one of the most important components of your overall bid. It works in tandem with the technical proposal, which explains how you will accomplish the project. Now, while the technical proposal demonstrates your approach, your expertise, and your ability to perform the work, the cost proposal provides transparency about what the effort will cost. So, how much does it cost to provide this janitorial services? So, everything we're doing today is breaking down how much it costs to provide the services. Now, government agencies are required to evaluate both aspects, your technical feasibility and the cost. Now, when determining which contractor will be awarded the contract, a well-prepared cost proposal. It tells you, right? It shows you that you have thoroughly planned out how to execute the project. Then it ensures the government that the project can be completed within the budget. So whatever you say is going to be, if it's 100K, 200K, whatever the project, can you stay within that budget? Then it helps establish that your pricing is fair, reasonable, and competitive. For example, if your technical proposal outlines a highly complex solution, but your cost of the proposal is too low, then the government may doubt that your ability to deliver the project at the proposed price. Now, you said it was one thing, but yet you said, and then so now they're questioning you. Well, do you really know what you're doing? Right? But on the other hand, if the technical proposal is straightforward, but the cost seems inflated, now they're thinking you're trying to get over. It's going to signal to them that you might be potentially rejected because your price is just too high. Such and such as ABC is putting at this price, 100K. XYZ is doing it probably 150K, then you way over here at 200K. That's just is off. So they're trying to make sure that it's competitive and in the competitive range. They're looking at a lot of factors when it comes to the cost. So now the importance of a prepared cost proposal. Why is a well prepared cost proposal important? Okay, number one, it impacts whether your bid is competitive. All right. Then number two, it ensures profitability without undercutting costs. See, because you don't want to get hurt in the long run too. So that is why it's important to develop your pricing so you know exactly how much you're going to be making, what is your profit, because if you're not making a profit, then you're going to go out of business. And then it aids in compliance with the government standards. So the role of a cost proposal is a cost proposal can be the difference between winning and losing a contract. In government contract, it's not just how well you can perform the work as shown in the technical proposal. It's also about how you price your services. And that's why it was important that we conducted a cost proposal, because there's so many nuances into doing coming up with your costs. So we had to separate the cost proposal training to a different training all by itself, because it takes that long to explain the nuances of it. And then a clear, detailed, realistic cost proposal demonstrates to the government that you understand the scope of work. Do you understand the scope of work? How many times that you're going to have to go? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Is it 2 days a week? Is it 3 times a week? Is it 40 hours a week? Is it 20 hours a week? So that's what they're looking for, to understand the scope of work. Have you considered all the necessary costs? Now, are they asking you to buff the floors? Are they asking you to remove carpet? I mean, what are they asking you to do? The carpet cleaning. What is it that they're asking you to do? And then can you deliver within the budget? Now, you told me it was going to be 100K, but are you staying within that budget? Now, failing to prepare an accurate cost proposal can undermine even your best technical. So you've wrote this excellent technical approach on how you're going to help the government, or you're going to come in and you're going to get this service, that service. However, you haven't priced it correctly. So that means you can't pay your employees, your subcontractors correctly. And then you still, oh, by the way, you still have to pay your rent, your mortgage, your rent, your office supplies, all those different things of that nature. Okay, so that's why it's important that you understand the pricing. Now, but you have to balance that, right? You have to be profitable, but you got to make sure you pricing it correctly. It is critical that you understand, because undercutting, that means you pricing too low. I've seen too many times we just want to win this contract, so we price too low. We haven't even did a break even analysis to see how this would affect our business, and then we wonder why we didn't win the contract, because first of all, you undercut it. You priced too much to win and it led you to losing the project altogether, because you didn't cover the costs correctly. Then overpricing. Then, so either you're undercutting or you're overpricing. You have to learn the difference. You have to be uh, balancing it. You have to balance the pricing, because if you overprice it, then like I said before, you're going to cut yourself out the competition, because your proposal is significantly higher than the others. That's why it's important that we always talk about market research, research everything you're doing. See what your competitors doing. See what your team and partners doing, because you want to make sure that you're in the competitive range. And we're going to give you those tools to do that, showing you which websites you need to go to for to make sure that you're pricing it, and then making sure you find the balance in pricing your proposal. Now, the key components of a proposal. So now it's important to understand what are the key components of a proposal. Now, direct costs. You're going to have to be talking about your direct costs. That's going to be with your labor and materials. Then we're talking about the indirect costs, and that's your overhead, fringe benefits, G&A, and then your profit. So it's important that you break down how you're going to be defining those. So now, following the FAR. So now I always tell you, don't just listen to what we're saying. You have to go research those different components, like the FAR part 31. It tells you you have to understand costs that are allowable, and then which costs are unallowable. So that's why it's important that we give you these instructions so you understand that allowable costs, according to FAR Part 31, are those that the government considers reasonable, allocable, and compliant with contract terms and FAR guidelines. So everything we do is according to the FAR. Now, examples of allowable costs are the direct labor costs, which is the wages and salaries of your employees directly engaged in the contract work. So we're talking about this particular contract that we have been talking about from the previous sessions. We're talking about the janitorial contract that we are going after, and they want to know who's all involved. Are we going to use two workers? Are we going to have a contract lead? Are we going to have just a contract lead, another janitorial team member, and then a subcontractor? Who is involved in doing the work? Do you need three? Do you need two? Do you need one? And that's all about coming into the pricing, because when you break up the pricing, that's how you know how much it's going to cost. The materials and the supplies, because you're going to have supplies. So the cost of materials, the supplies necessary for the performance of the contract. Is there any shipping and handling charges directly related to the materials used for this contract? We're talking about this one particular contract that we're going after. Now, the subcontractor's cost. Did you decide to just hire a subcontractor, or do you have one employee and another two subcontractors? That's these payments to the contractors is part of that prime contract. Now, the fringe benefits, because if you have a full-time employee, employers contribute to employees' health insurance, retirement plans, paid leave, costs associated with costs associated with legally required payroll taxes, Social Security, Medicaid. These are all the things you have to consider in your costs, and that's why many people struggle with finding out how much should they price the contract for, because they don't know what's all involved in government contracting, right? So the overhead costs, those are indirect costs necessary to support the operations, such as utilities, rent, office supplies. Now I have slides for everything. So I'm going to break everything down that we're discussing. Right now, we're going through the instruction part. I'm just telling you what's all involved. And that is why it's complicated for most small business to understand getting their pricing, because pricing, they don't it is, you don't know what you don't know, and so many things have not been taught to small business owners, and that is why it's important that you understand everything that's involved in direct costs, and then the overhead costs and fringe benefits. Now also, don't forget about the travel costs. Some of the contracts require you to travel if you have different locations in different areas. So, say you pick a janitorial contract that has one location in Maryland, then you have another one in Virginia, then you have another one if they're asking for that support, or if it's only local. So, those are some things you have to consider when you're dealing with your pricing. Okay. Depreciation, many times people don't understand that that's part of it too, but you have to know which section it's involved in, and then make sure it's not an unallowable cost. Then in the general and administration costs, that's the G&A costs, and that's dealing with the executive management salaries. Do you have any legal fees that you had to use to draw up the team and arrangement for this if you have a subcontractor, right? So then the HR for the payroll and processing and different things of that nature. So all those things going to play a part in this. So that's why it's important that you understand what goes in what section. Then we're going to talk about in depth each one of them. But then you also got to remember there's a lot of unallowable costs. You are not going to be reimbursed by the government for any of these costs. Now, those unallowable costs are entertainment costs, like costs for social activities, recreation, entertainment, related expenses like concerts, parties, employees out, outings. Those are not. There are unallowable costs. So that's why it's important that you know what you can add into your pricing and what you cannot add into your prices. Then, of course, no alcohol. We're not allowed to do any alcohol. And we know sometimes we have those events like a kickoff session or anything after hours events, and then you have alcohol. Those are unallowable costs. You cannot put those in. No lobbying costs of any kind. Any fines or penalties, those are unallowable costs. Any kind of charitable donations, you're not able to do that. Bad debts, from uncollected accounts, do not include those. Those are unliable costs. Then advertising, certain ports, they said costs of advertising to promote products or services are unallowable, except for recruitment of personnel, procurement of scarce items, or disposal of scrap. So in some cases, those costs can be allowable. So that's why I said this is a lot to take in. But like I said, you can always go back and rewatch the recording and everything because it's a lot we have to cover in a short period of time. So I have to keep it going really fast. Now, the personal use of your company assets, that is an unallowable cost. You're not allowed to do that. And memberships in social or civic organizations. Costs for memberships in clubs or organizations for social, athletic, or leisure purposes. And so some of those things are not allowable. So that's why it's important that you understand what is allowable and what's not allowable. Interest and finance costs, some of those things are not allowable. And like I said, I put all of those things in the notes section. So when you get your slides, believe it's all going to be in your notes sections. But I just want to make sure that I clarify everything with you. So then the next thing, let's break down the direct costs. So now that we're talking about the direct costs, what is all considered? So I always recommend that you have a spreadsheet, use an Excel spreadsheet when you're breaking up the costs, which we'll go over in our practical exercise, how to break up everything in your Excel spreadsheet so you can go line by line, making sure you account for all your costs. Because understanding your direct costs in the cost proposal. So, like I said, direct costs are those expenses that are directly associated with the execution of the project or contract. In context, so we're talking about the janitorial services contract that we've been going after. It's going to include the labor, the materials, and the equipment. So under that direct costs on that Excel spreadsheet, then you should include all of the direct costs, the costs. And we're going to go over that more in detail. And these costs should be straightforward, easy to track, making sure you have your documentation because DCAA, the Defense Industry, I think it's Audit Agency, they're going to be auditing your books if it's cost reimbursable contract, I know. But certain times you're going to have to be getting an audit. So you want to make sure you have all your receipts, your invoices, everything. And then those three main categories that we're talking about for the direct costs. Now, the labor costs include the wages, salaries paid to the janitorial staff who perform the cleaning services. Now, what you need to consider is we have to estimate the number of labor hours required to complete the cleaning service. Is it going to be 2 days a week? So that's why it's important that when you wrote the technical response, that you understand what they asked you for. What was the frequency, which would depend on the size of the facility. So how big is the facility? Is it 2,500 square feet? Is it 1,500 square feet? All of that is listed in the scope of work. That is how you were able to find out the different things you needed to do the pricing. So when you went to the scope of work, did the scope of work say daily cleaning? Is there a deep cleaning? Is it twice a week, 3 times a week? Because that's where you get your start. And then what is twice a week? Is it 8 hours a day? Is it 4 hours a day? That is how you're gonna know what the cost is. Now, once you figure out those hourly wages, then you're going to start multiplying it by the staff. So that's how you're going to come up with how many hours and then the materials. So, for example, for facility requiring daily cleaning, you might estimate I need 3 janitors, right? Each will work 8 hours per day, 5 days a week for 4 weeks, for this project. Or maybe it's 52 weeks, 60. It all depends on the specific statement of work and the scope of work that they've put in there, because every janitorial contract will be different. Everyone has different requirements, the number of people coming into the facility, and so forth and so on. All that dictates what the customer needs. Then once you have established that and have the total hours, then you're going to be able to work out how much is just for the labor hours. We still haven't added the materials. We still haven't added the equipment. And that is why it's important that you break each thing out so you will have something to start. What currently you have to do is create something so you have somewhere to start. So then the material cost, that refers to the cleaning supplies and consumables, because we're gonna need what? Trash bags, mops, paper towels, paper, everything. And everything has went up. So it's important that you know exactly how much. Are you gonna buy them in bulk? Because if you buy them in bulk, then you can save money on that. But if you don't get them in bulk, I mean, what kind of discounts? Because that's going to all be tied into your price. Now, key considerations you have to think about when you're thinking about the material costs. Ensure the material costs include the base price of the supplies and the delivery of shipping those supplies. So you have to account for the delivery. So if you get, because sometimes the shipping could be very high. So you have to account for them shipping costs. Now consider the frequency of the material usage. So I always say on that spreadsheet, put your usage on there. How much are we using? So for those 5 days a week, do we normally go through a gallon sanitizer or gallon? Those are the things you're going to have to talk about, because that's going to help you get a very accurate estimate of the contract. Now, many of you will say, well, I don't know what's in the contract, and I don't know because this is my first contract. But you got to start somewhere. So let's do the industry standard. Okay, so what does it take in your research to do the facilities 5 days a week? Is it 5 gallons? Is it 1 gallon? And then you can, for that month, you will see, okay, we use 10 gallons of disinfectant. So then you know that I need to order 10 gallons per, you know what I'm saying? So then you can really come up with your assessments. But those are some of the things you're going to need to know when you're coming up with that pricing. And many a times they miss that. So we said 10 gallons at $12 a gallon, right? So they're already, you've entered that in your spreadsheet so you can come up with a total. So then the trash bags, they're going through the trash bags. So then I need 20 boxes. And how much are the boxes? $25 a box, $6 a box. That's going to all be tied into that Excel spreadsheet that you're going to create to give you a basis. And then paper towels. So the total cost of materials is going to be in the materials cost. But oh, by the way, we still need to get some equipment. You need the tools necessary, such as a vacuum, floor buffers, carpet cleaners, and all those different things like that. So that's why I always say start off looking at the best practices, looking at the industry, because normally for janitor, you may have a association. People have already been doing this before. So you can get those, okay, I gotta get a baseline on where I need to start, because you got to start somewhere. So now you have that baseline, and then you can go. So just like if you was a proposal writer, you will go to the association of proposal writers, so that way they will help you with some of those things. So that's why it's important to have those different associations, attending those different events so you can learn more about it. Because if you go to the industry day too, you'll learn, oh, it was 2,500 square feet. What does it normally take to do something at 2,500 square feet? You see what I'm saying? So it's easy. It's not easy, but it's just work. It's market research. It's looking into the different things it takes to conduct the service. So when you're talking about those tools like the vacuums, the floor buffers, the carpet cleaners, and all those things, consider, because when you first getting started, you might not own it, but how about we can rent it? We can rent those different things. But now you have to get the rental fees. You need a cost estimate of how much will it cost, because I just got started. This is my first contract. I'm going to do 3 months, just do the first quarter, right? 3 months at this cost estimate. Okay, this is how much I need to project, but you still want to do it out for the whole year, because how about you want to rent it for the first 3 months, then purchase the equipment. So you still want to do those cost estimate of rented versus owned, because you got to get started. You need to get started now. You don't have the equipment yet, but you can rent the equipment and go do 3 to 4 to 5 cost estimates so you can see what the average is, and then do the average. So we know that XYZ is doing the buffer for $100 an hour or a day or daily rate or whatever it is for to rent it. But is it more feasible for I can just go get a little loan and then buy the equipment? But what we're trying to do is stay financially free and not come in with a lot of debt if possible. So that's why I said it might be feasible to rent the equipment. So if you rent a floor buffer for deep cleaning once a month at a rental rate of about $100 a day, and you use it for 3 days, right? So that 100 times three, what, that's $300. So you got to add that cost in there. But if we own it, we got the depreciation, the maintenance cost to maintain it. So all those costs have to be if we decide to own the equipment. So is it more feasible to own it, or is it to rent it? Is the maintenance cost to keep it? All right. Because with a vacuum, the depreciation, I believe it is 5 years, but see, I'm not gonna even, I'm not your financial person, so I don't know how to do all those tax depreciation and stuff like that. That's what the bookkeeper for and the tax professional is for. So they can really give you how much that is. But those are some of the things you just need to keep in mind when you're coming up with your costs. So that way you know. So now let's talk about the next thing. Okay, direct costs for full time. So I wanted to give you an example basically of what is direct cost for a full-time employee and how you will come up with your calculations, right? So for a full-time employee, the full-time employee tends to have a higher cost because of the fringe benefits, because you're paying for holidays, sick leave, vacation time. It depends on what you plan on giving that individual. So I'm excluding holidays because we already know the government doesn't work on holidays. So I took out 11 days for holidays, 5 days for sick leave. I did an hourly rate of $15 per hour, but you will have to find out what the hourly rate for your state is for the minimum for a contract, because there, those new laws out there for the minimum wage, for the hourly rate. So you will have to look at your state to see which one it is. Now, fringe benefits. In this example, we're using 15% of the wages, which covers health insurance, retirement, paid leave, et cetera. So this is just a quick snapshot of how you will come up with those pricing, because when you're trying to come together with your pricing, the hardest part is just getting started. So I just wanted to make sure I give you an example of how to get started, because this is what you're going to enter into the spreadsheet. You already know the number of hours. We already talked about it. So annually, because we're doing it for a base year contract. That's why I say annually, because everything we're doing is for the entire year, because we're doing the base. And if there's option years, then you want to be able to put that, what, 2%, 3% escalation in there every year. So after you've came with your, even though inflation is higher than that, we still have to be very conscious of that. So then you know your base. Okay. So we know they work in 1960 hours at $15 an hour. So we already know one time that's our cost. Then we got our fringe benefits. All right. Because that's including your health care, insurance, whatever you offer your employees. So if you don't offer all those things, but normally with the full-time employee, requirements is that you provide just the basics, the health insurance, the retirement plan, and then the paid leave, the sick leave, and those things of that nature. You will have to find out with your state what are those requirements, and then you see that's how you come up with your total for that full-time employee for that year you're going to pay. Okay, so that's why it's important to know that. Now say you want a full-time employee plus a part-time employee, so we did a calculation for you for the part-time employee. So now for part-times, normally for part-time we exclude holidays because they don't working anyway because they're part-time. But we don't give them. Now some employers may give part-time employees prorated rates for that sick leave and holiday leave and so forth and so on, but normally they're not eligible for those benefits. So then your calculations for a part-time employee. Now that's going to be according to the specific scope of work and how many hours. So every janitorial contract may be different. They may only want you to come 40 hours a week or 20 hours a week. We just don't know. So it's according to that contract. Okay. Then no fringe benefits in this case. So the part-time employee can reduce labor costs, but you may need more part-time staff to fulfill the contract requirements. That's why it's important to know what the contract requirements are so you know how to price the proposal. And because if you have all of them working as part-time, then you may need 6 or 7 or 8 versus just having 2 full-time. But then that means hiring, that means administration of those part-time employees. So it's a lot of things to consider when you're hiring a part-time employee. So that's why you have to make those decisions, those business decisions, after you've come up with the calculation. Now say I want to do a subcontract labor, right? The subcontract labor force. So then the subcontractor labor category. So say we're going to use him or her at the same hours as the full-time person. We just don't want to have to deal with the fringe benefits and all those different things. So we adjusted for holidays because even if you're a contractor, you're not working on the holidays. Most contractors are not coming in even on the holidays because the facilities is closed. So, however, the hourly rate for a subcontractor will be higher because you're not paying any taxes, any fringe benefits. You're not paying anything for the subcontractor. And subcontractors are typically paid a fixed hourly rate for services rendered because you're hiring an expert on your team. You're not training them. They have their own certifications, they have their own business, they've been doing it for a while, and you only need them for their expertise. Say you're only hiring this subcontractor because they're expert in buffing floors, or maybe you don't want to do the carpet cleaning, so you hire a subcontractor come in to do the carpet cleaning while you all do everything else. So it's many reasons why you would hire a subcontractor. Normally it's a subject matter expert in that field, and they don't require anything because they're an independent contractor. So that is the most easiest to manage in terms of costs because you don't have to account for their fringe benefits, their paid leave. So that's why it's very beneficial to have subcontractors on your team, or say your employees are out and they're on leave and you don't have anyone, then you have that sub in the shoot, so that way on your team and database. So say, hey, let me go down my subs because I had an employee call out, so let me call and see if one of my subcontractors are available to perform the work. You understand what I'm saying? But they had been put on this contract because sometimes, depending on how the contract is written, they want to know who the subcontractors are. So always remember that the subcontractors may be a higher hourly rate, but they can be more cost effective overall because you don't incur those additional fees like the overhead costs, workman's comp, all those different things, unemployment compensation, all those different things that we're going to um, have to deal with when you are having employees. You're going to have all of those costs and you have to manage and performance assessments, all those different things. Now, for a subcontractor, tier one, the prime contractor is starting to give past performance. So, like we would get from a government agency, they're also starting to do that as well. So, those are some things you need to consider. Now, this is the direct cost summary. So by, just by me presenting these three different examples, my hope is that you see the difference between the types, the full-time, the part-time, and the subcontractor, the way it affects the overall direct costs in the proposals. Having a very knowledgeable, you have to get knowledgeable in the costs because this is going to determine if your business thrives or it just falters. You understand? You have to have this down pat because full-time employees typically cost more due to the fringe benefits, while part-time employees and subcontractors may be more cost effective but might require additional management and coordination. Say that subcontractor is not available. That's why you need to have a subcontractors database or a teaming database. These detailed explanations will help you understand the factors to consider when developing your labor costs estimates for a fixed price proposal. So, this is for a fixed price proposal because it's so many things when it comes to cost reimbursable, time and materials, those different types of contracts. So that's why we only focus on one concept at a time, learning that one, and then you can move forward with others. And in this session, we're just focusing on how to respond to a janitorial contract. So for the final cost, proposal, the total direct cost will be the sum of all labor costs for full-time employees, part-time employees, and subcontractors. This is important because the mix of different types of labor impacts the overall cost of the contract. And so for this example, I wanted to use the full-time, the part-time, and the subcontractor. So that way you can see what the mix is. So that way you'll know that you can do different ways to come up with your costs. It may be beneficial for you to just do all full time, but as you can see, the cost is higher. Or you may say, well, I want a full time and two part times. And then you can see that I can get started right away. And I can propose about this, but we still haven't finished yet. We still have to put the rest of the costs in there. And then that'll be determined on how you proceed uh, when you come up with your final estimate to see if that's what you want to bid after you've done your market research to see is this a recompete? How much did they price the contract before? Or is this a new contract? Those all some of the things you need to take in consideration after you've come up with your costs, because then you can play with the numbers. Now, direct cost, material, the direct cost for the material cost, rent versus own. So I always want you to make sure, do the pricing. So you need the equipment for the project, including a floor buffer, a carpet extractor, or vacuum cleaner, whatever. And option one of owning. So do the breakdown. So we know the floor buffer costs what? $2,000. That's the purchase price. Carpet extractor, what? $3,500. And then the vacuum cleaner. So you already see how much it's going to cost for if I own the equipment. But if I did assume the rental is 6 month contract, it's a 6 months contract. The floor buffalo is $300 a month. The carpet extractor is $500 a month. The vacuum cleaner is $100 a month. So that's why I said do the comparison. See which way works best. Run the numbers. it's going to pay off in the long run. If you run the numbers, you'll know exactly what everything is. You've gotten several quotes, you know it's better. But if you can't afford to buy the equipment, at least find out what it is. And then if you can get a contract with that vendor for 3 months and then purchase the equipment after you've been paid a couple of times, and you see, okay, how the work is going. Oh, we really didn't need this equipment at all. You understand what I'm saying? So, because when you're first getting started with it, you don't know if you need the equipment or not. You just know that I want to make sure I'm covered just in case. So that's why I always say, it's important to understand the difference between rental versus own. Now let's talk about the direct costs, because in the interest of time, I don't want to belabor. So what is included in the indirect costs? So understanding what an indirect cost is. Indirect costs are expenses that are necessary to support the project or the contract, but cannot be directly traced to a specific contract or project. Now, while they are essential for the overall operation and the success of your business, they do not tie directly to this one job, this janitorial services contract that we're bidding on right now. So instead, direct costs are spread across multiple. So say you're going after this janitorial contract, then you're going after another janitorial contract. So it's spread across multiple contracts, but it's necessary for you to perform your job. So for example, while you may not be able to assign the office rent directly to one project, it's still a cost for your business incurred to support the operations of all of your contracts. So that's why they let you get a percentage of that. Indirect costs need to be fairly distributed across all projects you undertake. So say you only got one contract, you're not going to be, it's not going to be distributed off of that, just that one contract. It's the multiple contracts, but that's why they only allow you to take a percentage. So the overhead costs are expenses related to the general business operations that support the day-to-day work, but are not tied directly to a single project. So like your office rent, the cost of leasing your office. So if you have an office space or co-working space, your utilities, that's the electricity. So that's why I say you will have a tab for that Excel spreadsheet that says overhead costs, those indirect costs. So that's why I always say break everything out so you know what and what cannot, because it's only a percentage that you can take. Now, the office staff, wages for employees who handle administrative duties but are not directly involved in the project. So that could be the receptionist, HR personnel. Then you have your administrative expenses. So it's important. Overhead is essential for maintaining infrastructure that allows your business to perform the contract work. Failing to account for these costs can result in underpricing. So that's why it's important that you have that spreadsheet that you develop so you can keep up with those pricing. Now, the fringe benefits, we talked about those. Those are the non-wage compensation provided to your employees, such as the health care, the retirement, contributions, paid time off. These benefits are expressed also as a percentage of labor costs. We talked about the health insurance, retirement plan, vacation, and sick leave. Important. Including fringe benefits as part of your indirect costs ensures that you are covering the full cost of labor, the full cost of labor beyond just hourly wages or salaries. Failure to account for those fringe benefits can result another reason, result into underpricing the contract. That's why many people do not understand how to price their contracts, because they don't understand what's all included in pricing of the contract. And then the G&A, the general and administrative G&A costs, are broader. They're the corporate level expenses that to support the overall operations of the business. These costs are not tied to specific projects, but also are necessary. So, such as your legal fees, we were talking about. So, say you need somebody to do your team and agreements and all those things, the bookkeeping, the tax preparing, all those financial audits, the executive salaries, those are considered G&A. G&A costs are vital for maintaining the financial health and the legal health of your business. So it's important that you cover that as well. Now, the indirect costs, for example, I used the 15%. So the total direct cost for this one was for a firm fixed price contract, because you can't go back and get any of those costs. Once you give them, this is how much I'm pricing this contract for, that's it. So you want to make sure you include in everything and then have a calculation. So you take your time, learn how to calculate to see what the overall rate is, and look for the industry standards for the overall rate, the industry standards, because we're just getting started. So you don't know what the overhead cost is, but industry standards for janitorial services, if you will. And then the G&A, here's an example of the G&A. So we said the G&A is 5%, all right? Industry standards. So always look up industry standards for these pricings, because you want to be fair and reasonable. All right. So the direct cost of owning equipment. So you see, if I've already put in there as the 88 right here for the labor, but then we also put our materials so we can come up with our total costs, right? Then our total direct costs, that one was supposed to be the rental. So that way you have the owning and rental. And so this is the rental one. And then that was an error on my part. And then the ownership scenario is 5%. And then the rental scenario is 5%. So we can see how much we can do for the G&A costs. So this one is the rental equipment, and this one is the owning. So you have the owning equipment scenario and then the rental scenario. And so that's why it's important that you understand. So now, because we're getting close to the hour, I want to go over the last portion of it, the profit example. Now, for this firm fixed price contract, a 10% margin. So that's what we're trying to go for, a 10% margin, because that will account for unforeseen expenses that we didn't cover because we're new to the contract, right? We're new to writing a contract. We've never priced this contract before. So it's important that we start with a baseline, so we have some flexibility on how much should I price this contract for? Because this is the question I get constantly. How much should I price this contract for? And my question is, have you ran the numbers? Okay, so how much is your labor? How much is your material cost? How much is your overhead cost? What is your G&A? And then that will help you to know how much I can put in for profit to at least gauge where I should price the contract. Now, we've already did the market research on the contract to know how much the contract was if it's a recompete. But if it's new, then we're having to do the best cost estimate we can possibly get, and then to win this contract. Now the total cost. So now this is me showing you how it all comes together. It all comes together, the final total for owning equipment. So you have your direct costs, your material costs, your overhead costs, your G&A, and your profits. So total cost of proposal should be this amount, right? But if that's owning equipment. But if the total cost for renting equipment, we've done the numbers, right? And then the total cost for renting is which one would you decide to go after? But remember, now renting this equipment, this was only with a 6 months of the final cost. The decision is up to you. What is your budget? How much do you have? What can you get a line of credit? All those different things is going to play into making your decision on what total cost should I propose this. So here's the final total cost for both scenarios of what I should price this janitorial services contract for. So that's how you come up with a pricing, and we'll walk through it more in the practical exercise and putting those, you'll put the details in there. And so this is just an overview of the types of contracts. You can research this more, but the contract that we're talking about today is the firm fixed price contract according to FAR clause FAR part 16.202. Under a firm fixed contract, the contractor agrees to deliver the work or services for a fixed price, regardless of the actual costs incurred. So you see why it's important that you understand the costs incurred. The contractor must manage the project within agreed upon price. That is why it's so important to me that you understand the importance of getting that pricing. The pricing is the most important thing, so you don't underbid and don't overbid, and you're in a competitive range. Doing that research is important. And then the time of materials, which is based upon hours worked and the materials used, and then the cost reimbursable. That's the reimbursed for allowable cost plus a fixed fee or incentive fee. There's you could just go back to the clause and look at those different the impacts of the different pricing on your company later on, and more research, because I have the links in there and the notes in the section as well. But for the sake of time, I wanted to make sure you understood the act of your pricing must be highly accurate in a firm fixed price, because you're incurring all of the risks. Because if you go over, and then they're not going to give you any more money because you've priced it at this. It's a firm fixed price contract. And that's why it's important that you have that information. And then the tips for it. Just understand government pricing regulation. That's the FAR. And everything we're going to be talking about is the FAR part 31 and then FAR part 16. And then create a detailed cost estimate with justifications. Why did you come up with your reasoning? Why did you put that information at that cost? And then balance the competitiveness and the understanding why you came up with that. Because you have to thoroughly read the RFP and the regulatory requirements. You have to provide detailed and justified cost estimates so you can understand how to price it. And then, because one of the most common reasons proposals are rejected is insufficiently justifying the vague cost estimates. And it's important to have those detailed cost breakdowns just in case the contracting officer wants to know how you came up with that pricing, especially when it's a firm fixed price contract. They just want you to put the total in there, but it's important to understand that pricing is often not understood because they don't understand what all goes into the pricing. So when the understanding the contract type is essential for the developing the right pricing strategy. So that's why I just wanted to highlight the different types of contracting types: the firm fixed price, the time and materials, and the cost reimbursable contracts, because that is going to affect the pricing strategy that you use. And because we know this is a firm fixed price contract and requires precise cost estimates, and it carries higher risk for the contractor, it is important that you understand that having developed that pricing sheet is important to the success of your business. Okay, so as we get ready to start for the practical exercise, I only have time for one question because it was so much content.
Thanks, Akeisha. Okay, let's have a look. Let me scroll back up here. Oh, is there a specific format or template to use when submitting your cost?
Okay, so that's a great question. So the format is according to the requirements. So because this janitorial requirement we had, they just wanted a firm fixed price. They wanted the unit cost and the price. That's the reason why we had to break down our costs in an Excel spreadsheet so we could put the total cost for the base and the option years in this particular exercise. So for this particular exercise, they did not provide a template of how they wanted the price pricing. They just wanted a total price for the base and the option years for this contract. So that's the reason why we had to do the breakdown in the Excel spreadsheet. So each requirement will be different.
That's great. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break and we will see you back at 11:05.
Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so we're gonna move right on into the practical exercise. So let me pull up the pricing sheet. Can you all see that? Let me make sure you can see that. Okay, can everyone see the pricing Excel spreadsheet? I just wanted to make sure before I proceed.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what I did was created a little cost proposal workbook. This workbook is designed to help you calculate and track your labor and material, equipment, and indirect costs for each proposal, project, or contract. So we're using the NAICS code for janitor services contract, which is 561720. So step one is you will always do your labor categories first. In the training, we talked about the labor category. So say in this scenario, we compare, we're going to use 2 or 3 because we did 3 different scenarios on here. So say we want to use those 3 janitorial employees, one full-time paid, one part-time paid per. So you will go to the labor and start entering all of your labor categories, right? Because you have to create an Excel spreadsheet to put all that information in. So are we gonna, we just need a cleaning team lead, the floor tech, a subcontractor, what? You will put the costs right here, and then you will put hours per year right here. So because I don't do all those calculations and all those formulas and all this, I have to walk you through the phase because you'll have to do that. Go watch a YouTube video, anything of that nature, and put your calculations in there. My goal is to get you a template to use to get you started. And then you can probably hire somebody on Upwork, Fiverr, or whatever to do the calculations for you or your assistant. But the thing is, you have to know how it needs to be. So we have the total direct labor. You're going to enter here. So you can put your formulas in there after you have come up with those pricings. Then breaking out annual cost per employee. So if it's 2 employees, 3 employees, so forth and so on annually. What do your organization provide? Health insurance, dental, medical, vision? Do you have the 401k matching, pension plans, those things of that nature? You have to keep up with all your costs because everyone does it different. Every company is going to do it different. Every company has different rates and different things for those paid time off, vacation leave, payroll, because everybody's using different rates and have different compensation. So that's why it's important that you understand how to fill up the document, get the information that needs to be put in the document, and then customize it for yourself. Because this is going to help your business to grow and excel in the government contracting space, but you got to start somewhere. So that's why it's important for me to give you a guide on how to keep everything separate so you know you can take away, you can add, and making sure you're accounting. So when you do your write up at the end of it, you can actually write it up correctly because you know what your direct labor costs were, your materials. So, like I said, the cost per hour, the hourly rate. Okay, so the hourly rate wage is the amount you pay each janitorial staff member for every hour they work. And then you base that off. But like I said, you got to pull out those holidays because normally contractors are not working on the holidays, nor are the full time employees. And the only reason why, if you are essential personnel. And then, so then that means you need to add another tab for overtime and different things of that nature because you want to account for anything overtime. But if the contract says there is no overtime, then do not put overtime on the contract. So when I say the labor cost, we're talking about direct labor costs. And then the number of labor hours, you'll need to estimate the number of hours your janitorial staff will work to complete the contract, determine how many hours per day, how many days per week, how many weeks the project will last. So if it's a year, then you'll be able to, you have to do annually because it's a base and some option years. So if we're doing 2 janitor work, 8 hours, 4 weeks, basically. Okay, so let me go back here. So back to the instructions. So I put several links in here. So you got the DOL, that's where the wage regulations are, and those things are going to be. So we put all this information, the different FAR clauses, and I believe I had already put that information. Let me make sure that I have that pulled up for you. I do. So when you click on the links, it's going to take you to government contracts, compliance, and assistance. So we always want to check out the wage determinations online. Then you want to check out the different establish the minimum wage for contracts. You see the establishing paid sick leave for federal contractors, and then increasing the minimum wage. So I always tell you, be aware of the laws, because if you don't want to get in trouble with those different things because you didn't price the contract right, or you get a penalty because you didn't pay your workers the correct amount of money, the minimum wage required. Now, how you get your pricing, the calc tool. So when you click on that link, I also put in there a link for how you get to this calc tool. So we're going after janitorial services. So then you just put your janitorial services in here, and you see if you want a first line supervisor for house cleaning, janitorial, or if you want janitor. So then we just do the first line, so you can kind of gauge what the average is. So you don't have to start, you have somewhere to start. All you have to do is start putting the pieces together. Put the pieces together. So then how about they say you want to look at the state of, because we're in Maryland. So let's put Maryland. Okay, whatever state you in, you put your state and make sure to see if they're going to let you see what the state is for the state of Maryland. Let's see if it came up, because it don't look like it's working. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Let's hit that. Okay, there it is. And there it is. So for Maryland, the average right here is telling you the average rate in Maryland is, so depending on if you want more information on it, because they're telling you this is a journeyman, junior, a subject matter expert. The subject matter expert is probably getting more money because they might have a bachelor's, master's. We don't know. You have to find out what's the requirements for each. And then as low as 1808. And so, you have to be aware of those different pricings that what they have out here. So if you want to know, get some help with pricing, that's what it is. So that's a little pricing. All right. Then the next one is the contract cost principles procedures. This is what I was telling you about. So you can learn about the firm fixed price contracts. You can learn about the allowable costs, the reasonable costs, and determining the applicability, right? So this is the things you're going to go through to look at more in depth, because you'll have more time to take your time and look up the direct costs, indirect costs, and I've just broken everything down, synthesized it, and put into a PowerPoint slideshow, trying to make it easy for you to see and get to the information. But they're telling you how to go about the different things in here. And just so I always recommend that you go look at it, take times out to see what is required for a fixed price contract, all the different things of that nature. Oh, I apologize. My little dog was acting up. I apologize. Okay, and the different types of contracts. All right, so we talked about the different types of contracts, the firm fixed price contracts, and we talked about the costs. Okay, so I wanted to make sure you've seen that. So let me go back to the Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so now that I've shown you where all the different tools are, then the material costs. So the material costs. So we already know there's consumables. These are the everyday items that will be used during routine cleaning and maintenance. You have to budget for these things. How frequently are you using them? So I always say, make your notes right here. Are we going through disinfected once a week, 2 times a week, whatever? You make your notes so you'll know when you do your inventories, you'll see how much you've used. The disinfectant for sanitizing service, all-purpose cleaner. So when you first get start, like I said, you don't know all the equipment you need. So what you need to start doing is making a list. You just keep inserting and making a list of everything. So okay, we need it, and then each category of the list. So the waste management supplies, trash bags, you already know that. You're just going to keep inserting. And all you do is just keep inserting to add. So that way you can just keep adding the document, edible, you change it, you do whatever you want. It's just an example and it's just a little template to get you started. So you're going to be able to make adjustments however you want to do it. So then the cleaning tools, their tools are reusable, but may need to be replaced or upgraded periodically. So budgeting for purchasing, maintaining, or replacing these items are necessary. So like mops, brooms, buckets, all those things you're going to have to replace. But how long does it take to replace? How much do you have on? And then if it's specialized tools, then you're just going to keep inserting below that specialized tools. So like squeegees for window cleaning and all those different things of that nature. All right. So you just keep entering and then you add the quantity, cost per unit, and then the total cost. Because once you get the total cost down here, then you're going to take that. So your total cost for your direct labor is going to go right here on your cost summary sheet. So that way you can enter that here, your materials, your equipment, or so you can get your total contract costs because you know how much your profit is, you know what your subtotal is, what your overhead and your G&A. So that's the reason why I'm having you break out each one so you know you've covered all of the costs and direct costs. You've covered all of the costs and the material costs, and then you've covered all of your equipment costs. So now your equipment. So we already did the analysis of the floor buffer, the carpet extractor, or whatever you need. So then you just add all of the equipment in here. So then you have the rental rate per day, the number of days, the total cost, additional fees. So that's why I said that when we first started the training, it is important that you identify first. You got to decide, do you want rental or you're going to purchase? And then go through those different steps. Then you identify the equipment needed for this project. Then you've researched the costs, the daily, the weekly, the monthly costs. Then you estimated the duration of the rental, right? So then you've done all of those things that you'll have to do. So like we were telling you earlier, you're going to get this handout. You're going to get the slides so you can work through the exercise to see that you've put all the information in there correctly. And then you know exactly what it all takes to win the contract. Now, we also need to talk about the uh, indirect costs, right? So we have to put those separately. Everything has to be separately. You just keep inserting different levels in here so that way you'll be able to know exactly the percentage, because once we get the percentage, you're going to just keep entering your total cost, do the sheet according to however you want, but it's just showing you how to get started. Now I'm going to pause because I have a lot of questions I had to answer from the instruction session, but I wanted to make sure I was able to go over the sheet and start putting the stuff in the sheet so that we know exactly how to implement all the data in the sheets. Yes, but I had to answer because we had a lot of questions in the instruction portion, but I want to make sure before I move on that I've answered the session so I don't run out of time for the question and answer.
Okay, sure. So you want me to go back and look at the questions from the start?
Yeah, because I want to make sure I'm grabbing everything, because
Okay,
this is
great.
going to help to go into the next portion.
All right, great. Okay. Question is indirect cost the same as the labor burden?
So I think you're saying the fully burden, I guess you're saying labor burden. I think they normally say the fully labor burden rate. So that means everything included. So when I say um all of these is everything included. So that's what I think you mean, that fully burden. They normally say fully burden labor. So yes, that's everything included. So that means your labor, material, equipment, everything, and that's the price that I'm going to put on the contract. So I believe that's what you're saying.
Okay, thanks. Next question is how do I how do I calculate the hourly rate when they are not getting any fringe benefits? Is that minus 15% of the hourly rate?
Okay, so remember when we were breaking out each portion of, so if they're not getting any fringe benefits, the fringe benefits was a different calculation altogether. And if you go back to the PowerPoint slideshow, remember when you're going after the fully for the hourly rate, if there's no fringe benefits, it's just the base wages. There's nothing to take away because you didn't add any fringe benefits. So if I was to let me pull up the PowerPoint because I want to make sure. Yeah, let me take it back. So you see, when you're doing your direct costs at the beginning, so if you're doing direct costs, fringe benefits are only when you for a full-time employee. And that's why I said it's important that you talk to a legal person in your state, because some states require that you provide them with benefits. So if benefits has to be calculated in there, then you have to go through the steps of finding out, okay, so how much do we pay for the retirement? And that's when you have to do that calculation. That's why I had to walk through the process so you can understand. But if they are part-time, there is no fringe benefits added. It's zero. So you would do just the base rate. That's it, the base wages, because there was no fringe bit. And then for the subcontractor as well, there are no fringe benefits with a subcontract either. So there's nothing to take away because all you did was the wages. So that's why you have to do it in order of the steps, so that way you don't miss anything.
Okay.
I hope that helps. I think I answered the question.
We have two similar questions.
Okay, okay.
It's what should we do if our research shows that the government paid much less in the past than our calculations show?
Well, if the government paid much less in the past than your cat, don't bid on it, because that means you're not gonna. Why would you bid on something that you know that's underbidded because you can't afford it, because your break even? I mean, even is it even to your break even point? Because that means you need to go after something different, because you can't afford to underprice it or just price what you have, and then you're going to have to let the evaluator who's doing the proposals, because we don't know, I mean, did they change the scope of work? That's the reason why I was underbid, because we don't actually see the cleanse or the line items. They could have probably went up in the service. So before they only was using it once a week, but then this new requirement says they're using it 2 and 3 times a week because they seen once a week wasn't enough. If you don't have the initial scope of work and the contract for that one, we can't tell unless you did a FOIA request requesting that contract, and then they're going to redact a lot of the information from it. So do not undercut yourself, because you're going to hurt your company. Now, if you wanted to take that one and use that for just to get in to the government sector, that's a different strategy. So how are you going to account for that money in a different contract or something like that? That's an important business decision to make. So you don't want to go after things that's not going to add to your company's revenue, and it's going to hurt you and put you already in the red before you get started. So that's definitely a business decision that you need to make very cautiously, and then do the research, because like I said, they could have just increased the scope of work. So bid what the contract is supposed to be bid for, even if you lose it, because if you win it and then now you're making yourself go out of business. Or so you have to think about, that's a business decision that you have to make, and are you willing to sacrifice your employees, your business, for that, even if it's undercut.
Okay, thanks. Next
Mhm.
question is, how do I find a similar labor calculating tool for a state like Maryland?
Well, state of Maryland, I'm not sure about a calculator tool for the state of Maryland. Uh, Federal, now you asked me about the federal contracts, which is a federal contract. That's one way of doing it, but state, I have not seen a tool out there for the state of Maryland that does the calculations. The only thing I could tell you is to go look at past contracts that the state of Maryland have on the e-Maryland marketplace portal of awarded contracts, and at least get a base from there, like past contracts. But far as a calculator, I haven't seen a state calculator, because so many states do it differently.
Okay. Can I apply this approach for non-physical services like intellectual property?
So when you say non-physical services like intellectual property, so are we saying data? Are we saying software? Are we saying what kind of intellectual property? Did you build a new system, or what was this intellectual property that we're discussing? Because that will make a difference, because certain times the government, they have rights just like the intellectual rights. So you will have to know the intellectual rights for um the software, because each each one has different regulations. So you will go to the FAR and you will look up intellectual property, and then you will be able to get more information on that, because there are different rules for that. And I couldn't tell you that right now without having to do some research on the intellectual property.
Okay. Is there an industry standard percentage to account for inflation when we're calculating labor rates, materials, etc., for a multi-year contract?
Well, no, I mean, it would be nice if they had tools like that. But because inflation, I mean, just like now, I mean, we had COVID, then we had inflation, and we didn't account for all of the different the price that has went up now. So sometimes there's not a way to account for it. All we can do is really put in and try to do a really good estimate, and stay on abreast on the market changes and the industry changes for that specific field. But there's no, I mean, there's no tool that can give us all the answers. We have to do a lot of research when we go in after government contracts, because of the nuances and the changes and the different laws and the different bureaucracy that goes behind it. So there's no tool per se. It's the constant research and the looking up and the looking at past historical contracts to project. Nothing, nothing is set in stone, because things could change, budget could happen, we could have another crash, anything could happen. So it's really nothing that's concrete out there. It's a lot of due diligence we have to do, especially when we go on after government contracts.
Okay, last question. How do I
Mhm.
determine percentages for overhead G&A? For example, if my G&A is 5 grand, how do I express that as a percentage of the project, which will cost me 20 grand?
Well, that's those are those nuances that it's more details that you have to get behind, because how many, it's different projects. It's a lot of things that's why they always tell you is you have to have a pricing analyst, or have someone who does cost analysis on your team, because how many projects do you have? Like seven? Do you have six projects? Do you have seven projects? Do you have, how many contracts do you, it's a lot of those things. And then the percentage on the pricing, because once you choose one, 9 times out of 10, you got to stick with it. And so those things that have to go, and so far as the specifics, I can't help you with that part. You would need a cost analysis professional with that, because they can go into the nuances of your business, because it's a lot of things that has to be considered. We just give you the general overview to help you get started. And that's when you can start basing and then hiring those individuals who are the subject matter expert in that area of cost and pricing, so you can get the most bang for your buck. So I'm sorry I can't help you with that one.
Okay, that's all for now. Thanks.
Okay, good deal. All right, so let me get back to the training. But what I wanted to cover most is too, so when we had talked about our last, the solicitation, that because we have to go back to the solicitation. I just want to make sure you can see my screen. Okay. Remember, we were talking about the reason why this is the solicitation we've been working on for the last couple of episodes, well, the webinars, and this is how we came to learning everything about the reason we had to do our pricing. And as you can see, they only want to know the quantity, the unit price, and the amount. That's why we had to go all the way around, create the spreadsheet so we can come up with a price. Because for this janitorial services that we're requiring, the minimum requirements, you did your site visits or you did your in-person visit. They did a virtual and in-person for the contract, but this is what they wanted right here, because this is what our focus was: a firm fixed price contracts. And they said no changes due to inflation, market condition, labor rates, except for increase duly solely to the new DOL wage determination, etc. Do some research prior to submitting to your proposal. So that's the reason why I had to keep going over the importance of pricing your proposal correctly, because as you can see, it's written in the contract. They're not talking about the inflation. They want you to do your research. This training was to teach you how to do the minimum research you need to submit a viable proposal response that you feel confident in to go after and pursue this opportunity. So that's why I said to, I don't know the all of the individual things, but to make sure that you understand that this one is a simplified acquisition, and then it's going to be based off of price and other factors, including the technical response. So that's the reason why we had to take our time and walk through how you do the pricing spreadsheet. So when you come up with your total cost for the contract, as I showed you in the PowerPoint slideshow. So let me go back to this because I want to make sure you understand. That's why we had to take each step. What is, so when you're going out to fill out the Excel spreadsheet, go through each slide. Start off with the direct costs. If it's a, you have to identify, are they a full-time employee? Are they a part-time employee? Are they a subcontractor? Then you know which one to use for that. Then once you've decided it's going to be a full-time, part-time, that's when you start entering the details in the contract, because this is where you're going to find out where your costs are, because that's how you're going to find out all of your costs. That is how you're going to get the costs. And then going through these steps to find out what are the indirect costs, what all costs are considered, because 15% is just the rate I chose. It could, yours could be 30%, it could be 20%, it could be 25%. It's all based on those different calculations to come up with your overall overhead rate. So that's why I wanted to clarify that, make sure you understand. I just was being conservative using 15%, but I've seen people use 30%. The GNA could have been 10%. It's all case by case basis. So that's why I don't want to, because I'm not a cost analysis. I just know how we go about getting the costs. And that's why I say make sure you get a cost, and then understanding the profit fees and the different, well, the industry standards. That's why I always say those things you will get from those associations. So like me, I'm a PMP, so I will go to the Association for Proposal Managers. If you in the janitorial, what is your association? If you're in engineering, if you're in IT, those are the expertise. You want to know what the industry standards are for those different things. So that's why I can't give a just straight out, because I don't know for each agency, and for professional services may be different for each. And so this is how you know for the final costing. So this, when you're entering out your spreadsheet, and say we decide we want to do the only equipment, you already know that your total for the direct labor, and that's for what, 3 individuals or 2 individuals, however many individuals that you put on there, and then the material costs and the ownership costs. So these things are important to understand, because if you don't have that all broken out, how can you make projections? How can you go in and to change the different things and do the comparison? So for a fixed price contract, as we stated earlier, you're not going to be able to change it after that. And that's why it's important that you understand which part of the contract is, do we have any room to breathe, or something, or I didn't project my material costs correctly. Then I need to go back, because we went through 30 gallons of infectant, because it was multiple people coming in the organization. I had to come in and do the cleaning, but we had to use more cleaning supplies, or so forth and so on. So that's why it's important that you, so that way you can keep some of the profit, but that is that little room that you have to leverage, so that way you do not go over on the material costs and supplies and delivery and so forth and so on. So now I want to talk a little bit more about the, because we talked about the GNA, understanding that some of the things that I can't really cover here, because it's more in depth, and it's all for, it's kind of like individualized now. Now we're no longer at the high level. We're going down more into individual levels on how we're going to calculate which the impact of effectiveness of which type of contract we should use. So let me go back to the exercise. And so this is where we got all the specific tasks for. So the specific tasks where they asked, so that's why I told you, when they asked for those different things, I knew what they asked, because they said it was 6,400, 6460 square feet. And then they told you all the different things that were going to be daily, weekly cleaning. So that's when I went through and broke down each of everything I was doing. I was doing bathrooms, showers, changing areas. We had to disinfect it. So I already knew I had to have some disinfectant. So then they wanted toilet seats. They were telling you exactly everything. They wanted the frequency is to be conducted twice per week from May until October. And then they told you the different things for each area. So that's why I knew all the things I needed: trash can, receptacles, liners, all those different things. And everything I went in and I found it. I'm going to be doing cleaning, the kitchens, and then the different areas. So that's how I was able to start putting the materials sheet together. And that's what I'm telling you. So this can be for IT services, software database. You're going to take each sheet and dissect it, especially the scope of work and all the different deliverables, because then you're going to go through and see, okay, this is what I knew. I have to do the common areas, the public areas. Then they told you about the monthly services and the different. So that's how I knew, okay, I need to do this weekly. This one needs to be twice a month. This one needs to be only monthly. And that's going to help you, because if you can cut the costs for the government and then also cut the costs for yourself, that way it's a win-win for everyone. That is important, that you do the win-win for everyone. And that's the reason why I will always send you back to um, the GSA, so you can see exactly which is the pricing in the GSA. So when you're in the GSA right here tool, you're looking at the different prices, what they're talking about in this industry. But that was for a first line supervisor. So you're just looking at the different industry codes in here to find out what everything, and then what's the labor if they got a, I don't know if there's they only have one journeyman and one junior. So it doesn't really give you that information. But if you want to know a little bit more about if it's a degree, then you will probably go to the calc tool as well. So it's different things you can do to get your pricing. But be aware of the allowable costs. Go back and read those things and see exactly all the nuances in there, because everything you're doing is going to be based on your business. If you're in the janitorial services, if you're in the professional services, and it will also help you to make decisions on those things. So be aware and use these different things, and you'll read these the wage labor laws, so that way it can give you some more information on there as well. So let me make sure you have, so on this, so as we get ready to conclude, because I want to make sure you understand and do a little recap and make sure I didn't miss anything. It's important that you understand that to to really grow your business, you have to understand the costs. You have to understand what it all takes into creating your sheets, and then you'll get better because you can make notes, revisit your sheets, use them over and over again to see. And then once you get one settled and established, and all you have to do is continue to update it. And then you will save a sheet with each contract that you go after. So you will start gaining the historical documentation you need to go after different opportunities. And then the last thing, because I wanted to cover one more thing, because I wanted to make sure we didn't miss anything for the summary of the direct costs and the pricing breakdown. Uh, while it's typically not asked to, but is allowed. So when you do a RFP, you will definitely put in how you came up with your costs, because normally they ask for a volume cost. But because it's an RFP, and in the executive summary section, you can also put in there where the pricing in the executive summary. So you know how when we do an executive summary in the transmittal letter, we talked about it, that in I believe is an introduction to proposal writing. In that section, you can put in a little blurb on how you came up with your writing. How did you come up with your pricing? Excuse me, your pricing, because that's going to be important. So, and then the last thing too, because we didn't go over the last sheet. So let me go over the last sheet, because they gave you a checklist too, and they're telling you all the different things in here. I use this checklist too to make sure I when you're going to the facility and the stuff, you're checking off, okay, and then you're writing your remarks and notes so you can go back and update your pricing sheet, because you have to keep the pricing sheet updated so you'll know what it took. Okay, so when you do this is what I proposed, this is what actually I spent on this this opportunity, because you got to keep it with your actuals, what you actually spent. This is what I proposed and I won the contract for. But now, how much did I actually spend? How much profit did I actually make on this contract? Because that'll help you gauge you when you are moving forward on the different opportunities. So all you would do is fill out this information. Make sure you're putting your notes, keeping good notes, because you'll know exactly how to update your spreadsheet with the information. So, and then once you finish getting out, you put your calculations in there. You already know, we talked about it in the next session. We want to sign it. Make sure you sign it. You fill in out blocks 17A, because you got to put your NAICS code in there, and then your telephone number in there. Then you're going to make sure you put A, you signed it, everything, this one is ready to go. So you have, and then put your pricing information, and then everything else they ask for in the proposal. So that's all I had for the exercise portion, but I want to leave room for the final questions because sometimes I always run out of time for the questions, and I want to make sure I give time for the questions. I believe that was everything, and we did the practical exercise. And do we have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Keisha. That was a great presentation. We do have questions
Okay.
and we have a few minutes left. So now's your time to type out your questions, or if you would like Keisha to go over anything you missed. Okay, this
Yeah.
question is about filing for a DoD RFP, which involves government share and recipient share. What do these mean and how are they calculated? This person is a small business teaming with a university, and they want to know how the overhead costs from the university would be categorized.
Okay, so now that one, because so you saying you're teaming, that means you join. Is this should be a joint venture then? And so you got a portion in that teaming agreement. Should have said what was is it 20%, 40%? It would have said your percentage of the contract work that you allowed to do. So, but that's totally different. So that's why I said when we have these nuances questions like that, that one is going to be different because it's not what everybody is doing. So that means we will have to look at your pricing to see what is allowable with what's in your teaming agreement. So I couldn't answer that question. I would have to get more details in that one. I'm so sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. Next question. Could you please clarify that for multi-year contracts, we are allowed to increase our budget year over year?
Oh, yes, you are. Yes, you are allowed because we do have to account for inflation, right? But they're saying it's like a 2 to 3% increase each year. It shouldn't be like a 50% or 15% because sometimes they'll gig you on that if you go up too high. So that's why it's like you're accounting for just like with the government. They give us what 2 point something percent raise every time when you get a raise. So basically yes, you're going to put an escalation call every year. It will go up. It's not going to stay the same.
Okay. Does GSA only have the base labor costs per industry category?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, GSA they have because it's a lot of people on there doing their schedules. So it's based off people's schedules. That's where they're pulling the data from. So one company could put $40 an hour for that first line leader, but then the other person had put $18 an hour. It's what you propose for your company or organization and how much. Is it a bachelor's degree? Is a master's degree involved? So that's why I said it depends on who wrote the schedule, which agency it is, which state it is. There's different factors when they come up with those labor categories. And so when I'm trying to get up with a pricing, I always look for Maryland because I'm in the state of Maryland, but a contract in the state of Texas is going to be different than a contract that's in the state of Maine because the cost of living is higher. So that's why I said it depends on the state. It depends on is it a high school diploma, a bachelor's degree, associate's degree. All those things is how the GSA used to come up with their different labor categories. So it's a few things.
Okay. Can you recommend any tools similar to ChatGPT that can assist in researching vendors or subcontractors to create a pricing strategy?
Well, the only thing I could recommend is, well, everybody's using ChatGPT now. And then I always use the GSA schedule and the calc tool to see what my competitive pricing was. And then so what about USAspending.gov to look at past contracts? FPDS-NG is still open. They're using that as well to go after, to look at past contracts. And then SAM.gov, because SAM.gov have that portion on there where you can look at past contracts. But for is just individual labor, it's the hard, doing those sending out to 3 vendors or 5 vendors, trying to ask them what their pricing is so you can kind of gauge your pricing. You're going to have to do a lot of that too, because there's just not no one tool that you can use.
Okay, there's a question regarding CPARs. When
Mm-hmm.
teaming with a prime, should I expect that my business will also be evaluated on performance, or is it only the prime?
Okay, so now that new rule is, if you want to, I know if you're on a subcontracting plan, you're getting graded just like the prime, because the prime is going to grade you, because they're starting to have the primes to give subcontractor tier 1. That means the sub that is working directly for the prime contract, you will be getting the CPARs. Now, if it's publicly available, I don't know, but I do know that they're having the primes to do that now. They're having to do that on the ones with the subcontracting plan for sure. I know that. Now, for the ones that are not on the subcontracting plan, but you're just a subcontractor, um, I need to do a little bit more digging. But if I'm not mistaken, you're still getting one as well, because you can reach out to the prime and they'll give you that performance assessment report you need for to work with, because you're going to need that, and they provide it now. So if it's a subcontracting plan, yes, you get a grade, you get one. But if it's not a subcontracting plan, I think they recommend you give it. But for a subcontracting plan, I know for a fact you're supposed to get a CPARS, but it won't be in the system like theirs is in the CPARS system. It's a little bit different.
Okay. I think that's all the questions. If there's anything I've missed, feel free to type it out again. So yeah, thank you so much for participating today. Akeisha will be back next month, teaching contract administration. And
Mhm.
I've put the link in the chat so that you can sign up for that. And that takes you on to the next stage of this roadmap. And Akeisha, do you have any final suggestions or anything? What next? What's one tip or one next point action plan that people can take after this webinar?
Okay, so the first thing is implement. Many times we attend the training, we got all these tools, and we do not put it into place. The first thing you need to be doing is creating your template. If you're in the janitorial services, or if you're in the professional services, you do acquisition, or if you do software development, start putting those sheets together. Start going, okay, how many contractors do you have on staff right now? How many employees do you have right now? And then start from there. And then all the materials and supplies you use for your business. Once you've done that, then you can start going through, and because you have to break everything out, because normally we all just keep everything together. And I've seen too many clients when I was teaching at the Apex Accelerator. They came to the class, they had everything grouped together. So now what you need to do is, first things first, is separate it. Second thing, you need to understand what allowable and unallowable costs are. The next thing, so because that way you don't get in trouble for putting unallowable costs in your proposal. So that's why I told you, make sure you go to those websites that I put on the sheet. Make sure you understand what allowable costs are, unallowable costs are, and implement immediately. And then the last tip, because I always got to make sure, because I had plenty of notes, but I always want to be conscious of the time and not go over. But action it. Make sure you understanding, if you do the teaming agreements, you do these different things, understand what they're asking for in those teaming agreements. Do you do 40% of the work? And then if you only doing 40% of the work, you can't say you're doing 100% of the work. So it's a portion only that you can, and that's why I said it's those calculations and those nuances that you have to dive deeper in, and then do a little bit more research on. And sometimes you have to hire that subject matter expert to come on your team just to get you started. And then once you started, then you just keep rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And don't forget, you all, make sure y'all go to Neil McDonald's the GovCon Chambers, because it's free. He does training every day, well, Monday through Fridays, on how to, they helping small businesses, and then he have those networking events. So make sure you attend those networking events so you can see who's who in the zoo, build your team and database, and get this cost and pricing implemented as soon as possible. Okay, that's all I got, Yasmin.
Thank you, Akeisha. That was excellent as always. So thank you everybody for participating today, asking great questions. Hope you got a lot out of it. I'll be sending out the recording and the slides shortly. And we hope to see you at a future Apex Accelerator event. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.